by G. Rumay Alexander, President of the NLN, and Beverly Malone, CEO of the NLN. Also, welcome the NLN Board of Governors. Patricia Yodawise, President-elect. Teresa Schellenberger, Secretary. Ann Kraus, Treasurer. Governors at Large, John Lundeen, Anne Marie Morrow, Linda Moneyham, Lynette Woolford. Public members, Michael Newsom and Mark Vogt. Next, welcome the past NLN presidents, Marcia Howell Adams, Judith A. Halstead, Kathleen Schultz, Elaine Tagliarini, Nancy Langston, Sister Rosemary Donnelly, Sheila Ryan. Welcome the Fellows of the NLN Academy of Nursing Education. Welcome and congratulations to deans, directors, and faculty members from the 42 NLN Centers of Excellence. Welcome the presidents of the NLN Constituent Leagues. Thank you again to our COEs. And now, welcome the presidents of the NLN Constituent Leagues. And finally, please welcome selected NLN ambassadors that represent over 650 ambassadors in schools of nursing. Please welcome past presidents Marcia Howell Adams and Elaine Tatlarini, co-chairs of the 2018 Summit, as we present the history of the NLN, a legacy of leadership.
The year is 1893. The place, right here in Chicago at the World's Fair. The World's Fair is synonymous with showcasing achievements of nations all over the world. The exposition celebrated the ideas and innovation that would lead the way to the dawn of a new 20th century. For us, the World's Fair marked the beginning of organized nursing in the U.S. For us, as members of the NLN, a new world of reform and transformation lay ahead. Nursing was never the same after this. To set the context, let's go back to 1873, when nurses' training began in America. In that year, 3 Nightingale-influenced schools opened. They were Bellevue Training School for Nursing in New York, the Connecticut Training School for Nurses at New Haven, and the Boston Training School of Nurses at Massachusetts General Hospital. For the next 2 decades, there was tremendous growth in nursing education. The value of trained nurses caring for the sick was recognized by hospitals who welcome the free labor of pupil nurses. By 1990, there were 35 schools and 1,500 pupil nurses. But despite Miss Nightingale's influence, training schools were being opened without consideration for standards, and curricula lacked rigor and criteria.
Enter Mrs. Bedford Fenwick of London, who was leading an exhibit at the fair representing British nursing.
I am passionate about the need for the development of organized nursing here in the United States. So I persisted and convinced the hospital and medical congress, a physicians group, to form a subsection on nursing. I asked Isabel Hampton, superintendent at the Johns Hopkins Training School in Baltimore, to gather a group of superintendents of training schools to come to Chicago.
In her own words, Ms. Hampton describes that first meeting. Colleagues, please welcome members of the current NLN Board of Governors to describe the times and give voice to the words of our early leader pathfinders.
The Nurses' Congress was held in the Hall of Columbus in the Women's Building in June 1893 on the 15th, 16th, and 17th of the month. It was attended by 16 superintendents of training schools for nurses. I took this opportunity of suggesting informally the formation of the American Society of Superintendents of Training Schools for Nurses, and the idea was cordially received by those to whom it was presented. The discussion was informal and voted unanimous feeling in favor of so uniting to promote fellowship of members, establish and maintain a universal standard of training, and further the best interests of the nursing profession.
This was the first association of nurses in the United States. It would become the National League of Nursing Education in 1912 at the 18th annual meeting of the Society, right here in Chicago, and eventually the National League for Nursing in 1952 at the 56th Convention in Atlantic City, New Jersey.
Okay, Mike.
During the early years, the society faced opposition from physicians who objected to nursing's growing self-governance. The belief at the time was that nursing, often considered to be a role women were born to, did not require formal training or education. By forming the society, the superintendents collectively worked to counteract the external control exerted by those who inhibited the profession's growth. Power through organization remained a central unifying theme. They organized so that each superintendent did not face this challenge alone.
Linda Richards, the first professionally trained nurse and the first elected president of the society, addressed this issue at the second annual convention in 1895.
Training school superintendents have a mighty work before them. Instruction in schools must be made more uniform. The standard must be raised. And upon the superintendents rests the duty of having these matters properly adjusted. Women at the head of training schools are today bearing great responsibilities. Each one of us feels this burden Today, I welcome you to considering of very grave questions, the solution of deep problems which will influence each school represented here, and through these schools, all training schools in America.
Through the efforts of dedicated superintendents, the Society worked to overcome the tarnished image of the untrained, unkept, and uneducated nurse. The training schools sought women who were willing to devote their energies to nursing study and professional growth. An advertisement in the early 20th century proclaimed, "Sentimental women need not apply." The training schools with strong leadership were interested in the quality of life for pupils and graduates and sought for better conditions, and in so doing made significant contributions to the Americans' public health and well-being. Lavinia Dock, through the vivid descriptions in her diary, takes us back to the exemplary leadership of Isabel Hampton at the Johns Hopkins Training School in early 1900s.
I first met Isabel Hampton when she came to Illinois, to the Illinois Training School as the superintendent in July 1896. I was the probationer. 5 years later, she offered me the position of her assistant at the Johns Hopkins Training School. The hospital was new, and life in the training school was cheerful yet simple. It was Miss Hampton's custom to read prayers just after breakfast in the parlor, and with military discipline, every nurse attended. We had a hymn, which I loved to play on the piano. Then it was our custom to go with the nurses and the pupil nurses to the door and watch them go down the corridor. When I think of the hospital now, it is always this picture that I see. The nurses and the pupil nurses in their blue dresses streaming down the corridor, and Miss Hampton, her large eyes radiant with pride and joy in her flock. Almost always, as we turned away, she would say to me with a little squeeze of the hand, "Docky, aren't they so nice?"
Caring for and about students, improving the working conditions of pupil nurses and graduates permeated the early days of the Society. Equally important to the Society was the development of a standard curricula that advanced theory and practical knowing, and that established the roots of contemporary ethical practice. Finding the right balance between theory and practice challenged the superintendents. In 1897, at the 4th annual meeting of the Society, President Agnes Brennan called for a new understanding of the theory-practice dilemma.
Anyone who has been ill knows that the height of good nursing consists principally in what is done for the patient's comfort outside of regular orders. A theoretical nurse performs her duty in a perfunctory manner and may carry out the doctor's orders to the letter, but the patient recognizes there is something lacking, and we know that the skilled touch, the deft handling, the keenness to detect changes and symptoms, the ready tact, the patience, unselfishness, self-reliance, and good judgment can be acquired only by much practice. And a good nurse, without these attributes, despite her wide theoretic knowledge, will never be a successful one. Theory fortifies the practical. Practice strengthens and retains the theoretical.
This idea was revolutionary, to combine knowledge acquisition and scholarship with practical training, especially in an age when women's work was not valued and the moral integrity of nurses' work was not fully established. To balance theory with practice in an emerging yet embryonic nursing curricula would require specialized teacher training. As early as 1897, at the 4th annual meeting of the Society, Isabel Hampton, now Isabel Hampton Robb, expressed her concern.
The position of superintendent of nurses requires a woman of executive ability, education, tact, refinement, and keen perceptions. It is so important that she should have had a thorough course in the theory of her work. But a woman might possess all of these qualities and still be at a disadvantage when undertaking her first school due to lack of preparation for teaching.
Enter M. Adelaide Nutting, head of the Society's Education Committee. Together, she and Isabel Hampton Robb were a force. Together, they set out to find a university to prepare superintendents to teach. Colleagues, this was extraordinary. Women, especially nurses, did not go to college. Yet the course in hospital economics began at Teachers College, Columbia University in 1899. In 1923, on the occasion of the 30th anniversary of the Society, now the National League for Nursing Education, M. Adelaide Nutting spoke of this transformative moment.
One is tempted to wonder if this decisive moment in our educational progress has been unseen and unrecognized. This day, when part of the education of nursing passed out beyond the hospital and into the university. This day, when Isabel Hampton, with the support of the Society's Educational Committee, prevailed upon Dean James Russell of Teachers College, Columbia University, to open its doors to graduate nurses and lay the foundation for the training of teachers and public health nurses.
The partnership with Teachers College paved the way for new thinking about the education of nurses.
Although it was clear that a training school could not exist without a hospital, it became apparent to the superintendents that affiliation with a university was a better way to prepare their pupils. The Society looked forward to the day when nursing education was situated within the university. At the 36th Annual Convention of the National League of Nursing for Education in 1930, Annie Goodrich, who had become a member of the Education Committee that first spoke to Dean Russell and then led the Teachers College program, spoke to the delegates 7 years after she assumed the position of Yale University's inaugural dean.
We shall never render our full service to the community until our place is found also in the university. We must require our women in the future 2 languages: the language of the people and the language of science. That nurses have learned the language of the people is evidenced by the group meeting here today. But if we are truly concerned with our field of work, we must speak also the language of science.
By 1930, so much had been accomplished.
Most nursing programs were 3 years in length, and the curriculum had been modified to reflect emerging specialties. In 1917, the first standard curriculum had been developed by the Education Committee under Adelaide Nutting and would be revised in 1927 and guidelines developed in 1937 under the leadership of Isabel Maitland Stewart. Educators received a post-training certificate and were using new teaching methods. There were laws regulating the practice of nursing on the statute books of most states. The Society, now the National League for Nursing Education, had led a movement to reform health care by bringing excellence and integrity to nursing education.
Extraordinary leadership is the essence of this story. Throughout the history of the National League for Nursing, the influence of our leaders in accomplishing reform and transformation of nursing and nursing education cannot be minimized. In 1900, Lillian Wald spoke eloquently about the powerful role of women and nurses to achieve public health reform. She spoke candidly at the 6th annual meeting of the Society.
There is one subject that as citizens we shall have to undertake in the interest of all as well as for the profession, and that is to help with civil reform. This one idea I wish above all to bring out, that among the many opportunities for civic and altruistic work pressing on us from all sides, nurses having superior advantage in their practical training should not rest content with being only nurses, but should use their talents wherever possible in reform and civic movements.
In 1904, Lavinia Dock asked members of the Society if the Society is a moral force, a public conscience. She passionately believed in the power of the Society to affect social change. She asked, to what extent is the Society an influence? To what extent does it affect the public? Lavinia Dock believed that the Society would often be astonished at the actual extent of its influence. She believed that present, unsuspected power was actually to be systematically exerted in an intellectual and energetic manner.
Power, by its very nature, has been an ongoing theme throughout the history of nursing. Solidarity and organization was foundational in the early years of the Society. Throughout the history of the NLN, our leader pathfinders sought to surface the collective power of nurses and the emerging power of the nursing profession to leverage both educational and social reform. There are so many stories to illustrate this legacy, yet none we think more powerful than the story told by Mary Elizabeth Carnegie about her experiences in the 1940s and 1950s. Dr. Carnegie, living legend, educator, author, reforming, an unceasing champion of racial equality in nursing, sat down with Dr. Sandy Lewinson in 2001 at the NLN and recounted her leadership journey.
When I went to Florida A&M as dean, and the state board had a conference in Jacksonville at a hotel and invited me to present my rotation plan. So I went in the morning. I presented my plan. It came time for lunch, and I could not sit and eat with them. They put me way over there in that corner by myself, and I couldn't eat. So I left there and went back to the campus. I said, I'm not going back there. I'm not going to be embarrassed. I'm not going to do it. And one older faculty member said to me, he taught chemistry. I remember his name was Mr. Tenner. He said, Dean, that's what they want you to do. They don't want you to come back there. So you're playing right in their hands when you say, I'm not going back. You are going back again and again. It was up to me to take the leadership role and really fight for real integration, not just on paper. You never win by staying away.
The strong and determined voices of our leaders resonate throughout the history of the NLN. Their words, spoken so eloquently by our current leaders, the NLN Board of Governors, fully recognized that nursing as a profession needed to embrace its emerging status and make public its strong foundational mission to lift the human spirit and influence social reform.
Ours is a powerful history, a history that belongs to all of us. In the early days of the society, despite the need to accommodate to the political realities of the time, educational standards were put in place, suitable criteria for quality leading to accreditation was established, and affiliation with university schools to nurture pedagogical expertise was realized. And colleagues, what is most striking is that the issues of the past, quality curricula, pedagogical excellence, ethical and safe practice, the negative isms, racism, misogynism, and those of the present are amazingly aligned. In the spirit of Isabel Hampton Robb, Lavinia Dock, M. Adelaide Nutting, Lillian Wald, Agnes Brennan, Annie Goodrich, Isabel Stewart, and Mary Elizabeth Carnegie,
We are called to walk in their footsteps, to act with purpose and tenacity, to co-create a transformative future for the NLN, for nursing education, and for the nursing profession. Colleagues, 125 years later, as we gather once again in Chicago, we stand in awe of the wisdom, grace, and foresight of our past leaders. And just as our early leaders banded together to reform nursing education and create a preferred future for the nursing profession, we look to the future with determination and optimism. Our profound legacy of leadership, diversity of thought and perspective, and caring commitment to the human spirit is ours to nurture and flourish.
We are the NLN, and like our early leaders, united in our work, we share a commitment to act for, with, and on behalf of our students, our faculty peers, our staff, our interprofessional colleagues, and the patients we are privileged to serve every day.
As we look to our future, we embrace our core values of caring, integrity, diversity, and excellence, values that were so much a part of our early history. It is upon this foundation that we fully embrace a transformative future. Please welcome to the podium Dr. Rumay Alexander, NLN President, as we continue our legacy of leadership.
My fellow NLN colleagues, we look good for 125 years of age, don't you think? Let me try to package what we have just witnessed and will continue to experience throughout this summit. Awe, AWE, plus some special moments. The experience of awe, for example, the sight of the Grand Canyon, the birth of a child, a spectacular sunrise or sunset, changes our perception of time and expands the moment. One important insight that has emerged from the scholars of the science of awe is that awe lives in the upper reaches of pleasure and has two key attributes: vastness, the experience of something larger than ourselves, and accommodation, the vastness which forces us to adjust our mental structures. It brings people together, and it brings people into the present moments, the lived experience of being here and being a part of history. Yes, this is an awesome time, and in this very room and at this very time, you just made history. Let me first declare that NLN is a history maker, and let me tell you why this is so. Did I remind you that we are the oldest nursing organization in the country? The honor of serving you, representing you, and presiding at this momentous time in the history of the organization is amongst the greatest highlights of my professional life, and I am eternally grateful for the support and affirmation of me from all of you. Now let me continue to tell you why we are history makers. History makers form an indelible imprint on the world. Their significant contribution disrupts the status quo and signifies major turning points by which time can be marked and measured. Their inventions, innovations, ideologies, philosophies, political stances, and creative inspirations are so unique that nowhere at any point of time has such a construct existed. History makers embody a collective set of characteristic traits such as foresight, creativity, drive, ambition, and passion. And while these characteristics exist in the masses to some degree, there are very few that embody them all. Fundamentally, they are visionaries gifted with the ability to think beyond. Those who came before us saw the world differently, heard things differently, or simply thought differently. This organization's unique perspective throughout time has set us apart from others who coexisted. We have pushed boundaries and embraced being a change agent who would be relentless in making things happen and bringing ideas to execution. Fortunately, our history is rich with highly original thinkers who tended to look for ways to solve problems and improve on existing ideas, to develop useful solutions which fill the needs of the time. To continue our legacy, we can ill afford to be placed in the category of being history in an entity that used to exist. It is far better to be a part of history than to be known as what was. To let it go, as Elsa in Frozen would say, kiss the past and embrace the future and use it as an ending for what no longer works, but rather to help us encode, energize, edit, and elevate. The benefits of thinking fondly about the past, some people call that nostalgia, delivers two ingredients essential to well-being: sense of meaning and a connection to others. In some ways, the past is always with us. It's known as legacy, and legacy always brings the past into the present. Thinking in the past tense offers a window into the intrinsic self, a portal to who we really are. It makes the present meaningful, yet a mindset of this is how we've always done it can have unintended consequences. It can make us stale, irrelevant, and like the dinosaurs, extinct. To continue our legacy, we can ill afford to be placed in the category of being history. It is far better to be a part of making history. Historical memory is not simply the articulation of some shared subconscious, but rather the product of intentional creation. Let's use it also as our beginning for the next 125 years of national nurse leaders. Fidelity to our enduring values of excellence and caring, diversity, and integrity must be nurtured and turned to because they serve as our North Star and will help us find the way forward. The challenge for us is the weaving of the past in its glories and failures with a picture of the present and future to which we aspire. We must take great care of our inheritance. What will happen in all the days to come is what we do today. To borrow a phrase from a Verizon commercial, we don't wait for the future, we build it. And this is how we do it. The 5 action imperatives for the future are to inspire and boost optimism. Secondly, unite with collective ambition. Third, to focus and initiate strategic planning. 4, sustain operational effectiveness. And 5, communicate, communicate, communicate. Enhance our reputation, recognition, impact, and engagement. Now, I must admit, making history is hard work. It sometimes moves in circles, but work hard we must, or we will be history. The word itself helps us with so much direction. So we do so by H, honoring the values that brought us this far with character and conviction. Integrity is easily lost when we are feeling or reacting to impatience, disappointment, desperation, aggression, hurt, loyalty, and power. We must be about and execute the work that resonates with our values so that we are never in a place to invent what happened. Having an imagination is the I part of this acrostic. Imagination that includes and inspires by insisting in thought, word, and deed on the dignity of every human being and every healthy form of educational development. For NLN, it does not matter your degree, bloodline, part of the country, or time in this country. We represent you all, and we include you all. The S is because we must continue to be, as we are, standard bearers. Standard bearers provide shape and honor to our present life, even when we disagree. Demand higher standards and put groupthink in its place. Much of the impact of our legacy in this world hinges on our willingness to do so. Strive to be and do better. Show the world this is how we, the NLN, do it. Do not sit on the premises, but stand on the promises and lead with magnanimity. The T is about transcending time. Draw to the instruments of inquiry, innovation. This is how we preserve the awe of the organization. And we focus on ways to improve situations rather than complain. You know, history is about storytelling. And with haste, I remind you that some of the most serious information anyone can receive more than likely comes not in tables, numbers, a pie chart, an equation, an algorithm, or a graph, but in a story. Being history is about storytelling regarding what happened at a certain time in a certain occupied space. Making history is about creating and designing the story for others to tell as you wish to have it told. The philosopher Gregory Basin used to tell a joke about a man who asked a computer, "Do you compute that you will ever think like a human being?" After assorted bleeps and blinks, the answer on the computer appeared. That reminds me of a story. Peter Schwartz, in his book, The Art of the Long View, reminds us that the U.S. Constitution is at its core the formal story of the political utopia the Founding Fathers designed. The celebration of the NLN's 125 years of existence highlights stories from our beginning to now. And colleagues, all stories add up to where we are presently. It is more important than ever to work on stories of civility, courage, celebration, character, and change. The O in history is for our need to opine. We have been a voice, not an echo. Language is action, and when we speak, we generate our reality and we generate our future. Talk and teach in the next dimension, speak it, generate our reality and our future. For the learner inherits the future. The learned has only the past. The R is for resilience, the reinvention of ourselves. Making history requires resilience. Some call it grit. The ability to endure human ridicule, a desire to contribute something to the world. This requires the ability to forego comfort and stand firm against the grain of current thinking and opposition, and most of all, to be willing to forgive. Remember, forgiveness doesn't let the other person off the hook. It sets you free. History has provided us with such examples of people with this grit and creativity and passion and ambition. Such people like Socrates and Gandhi and Mary Seacole and Florence Nightingale and Virginia Henderson and Rita Dumas and Elizabeth Carnegie, our past NLN presidents and board members, and then some of recent, like a Martin Luther King or Mother Teresa, just to name a few. And then the whole world ends with a Y, and the Y is for a yet mentality. The challenge of the human condition is to bring the past, present, and future together. The highest function of the future is to enhance the significance of the present. The future can be better than the past. Hope is necessary to make the future happen. And we must remember that we're all candles in the wind. So let's give the world something to talk about. Kind of reminds me of a story as I close for you. There's a fire station number 6 in Livermore, California, which draws visitors from all over the globe. They come to see the world's most famous light bulb. It's a 60-watt bulb installed in 1901, which has been shining for over 115 years continuously. That light bulb continues to baffle scientists who can't explain how it has managed to glow for so long. Physicists discovered that the bulb's filament, the heart, what I call the grit of the bulb, is about 8 times thicker than that of an ordinary bulb, giving it extraordinary durability. And since when we usually think of light bulbs and we think of saving energy, we kind of take the switch and cut the muffin off, it actually creates, when we do that, a shorter lifespan. The fact that this bulb shines 24 hours a day is part of the secret, and it's not being flipped on and off. NLN, like this light bulb, we are called to radiate light continuously. In a troubled world struggling for hope and wanting for light in leadership, where effort has lost out to entitlement, we must stay woke. Yes, that's what I said, stay woke. Continue to carry the bright flame of goodness, civility, inclusion, excellence, and caring. If we do not, history will not be kind to us, and a cheated destiny will exact its revenge. Let's give the world something to talk about in 125 years from now about us, the National League for Nursing. Thank you.